The bad smell of rotten swamp and concrete dust hit my nose as I watched Karen from the HOA yell at a city inspector. Behind her, her expensive $800,000 house sank deeper into the wet mud. Flood warning sounds came from police cars parked nearby. Frogs made loud noises from what used to be neat, clean front lawns. An old, rusty mailbox floated by like a sad little boat at a funeral. Yep, that's my neighborhood. You're probably wondering how we got here. Let me take you back to when this whole mess started. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to comment and subscribe below. For years, a small creek wound through my backyard. Nothing fancy, just a gentle stream that carved its path long before any of us built houses here. That creek was my refuge after long days of welding pipes and crawling under houses. I'd sit in my old folding chair, beer in one hand, fishing pole in the other, and just breathe. Dragonflies zipped through the tall reeds. The air smelled like wet grass. At night, the only sound was water bubbling over rocks. It was the kind of peace you don't mess with. Then came the HOA. The Homeowners Association had existed on the other side of our development for years. All those identical beige houses with matching mailboxes and suspiciously coordinated porch decorations. We Creekside folks were the old-timers, leftovers from when this area was nothing but fields and dirt roads. But boundaries changed. Neighborhoods got combined. Before we knew it, the HOA had slithered into our lives. I got my first taste of their nonsense when a woman named Karen Mitchell showed up on my porch one Saturday morning. Her clipboard was clutched to her chest like a shield. She wore fancy workout clothes despite clearly not working out, and her smile had all the warmth of a tax audit. "I'm the HOA Community Standards Chair," she announced, nose in the air. I introduced myself as busy, but that didn't stop her. According to Karen, my creek was an unauthorized water feature that posed a significant safety hazard to neighborhood children and wildlife. I stared at her like she'd just accused my cat of running a pyramid scheme. The creek was natural. It had been there long before any of us showed up with our mortgages and lawn mowers. It was as much a part of the land as the trees and rocks. Karen didn't care. Karen had rules. Rules about fencing water features. Rules about standing water. Rules about aesthetics. I politely told her the creek was protected natural drainage according to my deed and county regulations. She just scribbled something on her clipboard and huffed away, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume and pure rage. 2 days later, I got my first violation notice stuck to my door. It accused me of unauthorized landscape elements, unsafe open water, and attracting non-native species. Apparently frogs now counted as foreign invaders. I ignored it. A week after that came a second notice threatening $100 daily fines unless I submitted a plan for bringing my property into compliance. I wrote back a simple letter quoting county codes and attached a copy of my land survey showing the creek's protected status. They responded by scheduling a mandatory inspection. 3 strangers wandered around my backyard with tape measures and smartphones, snapping photos like they were building a case for war crimes. Karen supervised from the edge of my property, tapping her toes impatiently. At the next HOA meeting, which I had no intention of attending until then, Karen stood up and declared my creek an imminent safety hazard. She cited insurance risks, wildlife attraction, mosquito breeding, and potential erosion. When I stood up to argue, she smiled sweetly and handed me a packet demanding I either fence the entire creek, fill it in, or submit to weekly HOA inspections at my own expense. I told her exactly where she could stick her paperwork. Politely, of course. After that, things escalated. Anonymous complaints about my overgrown landscape appeared on my door every few days. My mailbox got mysteriously knocked over. Someone dumped landscaping rocks into the shallow end of my creek, making it back up against the banks. I caught Karen herself taking pictures of my yard from her SUV, engine running like some suburban spy. I refused to budge. I kept the creek natural, kept the reeds trimmed, kept the flow clear. It was my land, my water, and my right to enjoy it in peace. I should have known they wouldn't stop there. It happened early one Wednesday morning. I was sipping coffee on my back porch when I heard heavy equipment rumbling nearby. At first, I thought it was city workers fixing the pothole on Maple Drive, but the sound got closer. I stood up just in time to see a cement truck backing down the side alley between my house and my neighbor's. A man in a neon vest was guiding it like he was parking a Ferrari. I sprinted across the yard as they positioned the chute directly over the upper curve of my creek. "Hey!" I shouted, waving my arms. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The vest guy barely glanced at me. "Just following work orders, sir. Drainage mitigation project approved by the HOA." Before I could get another word out, A thick gray slurry of concrete began pouring into my creek. I charged forward but slipped in the mud and fell hard, scraping my arm. By the time I got back on my feet, the cement was already spreading like toxic ooze, coating the pebbles, drowning the reeds, suffocating the water. Frogs leaped desperately away, but some were too slow, trapped in the sticky mess as it hardened. The workers just kept pouring, casually filling the entire upper section of my creek with concrete while checking their clipboard and nodding. I screamed at them to stop, to show me paperwork to get off my land. They ignored me completely. When they finished and drove away, my beautiful creek had been reduced to a grotesque concrete scar, a lifeless ditch stretching across my yard. Karen watched from the sidewalk, arms crossed, smiling like she'd just won a chess game I didn't even know we were playing. I wiped mud from my eyes, straightened up and smiled right back. Let her have this round. She had no idea what kind of storm she had just unleashed. The first rain came almost as a relief after the hot summer we'd had. A heavy sheet of gray rolled in from the west, drenching our neighborhood. I sat on my porch, arms crossed, watching as thick raindrops hammered the roof and turned lawns into muddy sponges. Normally, the creek would have handled this without complaint, its little mouth swallowing the runoff and carrying it downstream as it had done for centuries. But this time there was no creek to catch the water. Only a long concrete scar, hard and slick and useless. I watched the rainwater hit the concrete channel, swirl uncertainly, and then begin to back up across my lawn. Within an hour, puddles stretched across my backyard. By noon, the sidewalk out front was ankle-deep in murky runoff. Across the street, Karen Mitchell stood on her porch with an umbrella the size of a beach tent, watching with thin-lipped satisfaction as water lapped at curbs and flower beds. It took just 2 storms for the real problems to appear. Mrs. Jensen at the corner house woke up to find her basement carpet soaked through. Mr. Alvarez had to stack sandbags at his front door when a river of runoff poured down his yard. The gutters on Maple Drive overflowed so badly that the whole cul-de-sac turned into a stagnant pond, trapping cars up to their wheel wells in dirty water. And every single time the HOA sent out notices blaming the homeowners: improper lawn grading, clogged personal drains, failure to maintain property water runoff according to HOA standards. Not once did Karen or her cronies mention the fact that by pouring concrete into the natural drainage path, they had crippled the entire system. It was as if the creek had never existed. I said nothing publicly. At meetings, I nodded politely when they showed satellite photos with red circles around problem areas. I watched as they passed new emergency measures requiring mandatory property drainage inspections, which, coincidentally, cost $250 per household. I played the fool while secretly documenting everything. After every storm, I walked the neighborhood with my old camera, pretending to be a hobbyist photographer while snapping hundreds of photos. Flooded yards, submerged mailboxes, water pooling along newly landscaped common areas. I kept a notebook filled with times, dates, locations, and notes about which homes suffered worst. I even started flying my old drone after bigger storms, capturing aerial shots of water flow patterns. Nobody seemed to notice. They were too busy fighting with each other. Mrs. Jensen accused the Alvarez kids of blocking storm drains with soccer balls. The Hendersons blamed the Patels for installing a flower bed that supposedly redirected runoff onto their lawn. People who had once shared beers and barbecue recipes now filed formal complaints against each other for deliberate water mismanagement. The HOA naturally leaned into the chaos. Karen headed up a new flood mitigation task force, which mostly involved writing aggressive violation letters and pushing through emergency fines. Meanwhile, the actual drainage infrastructure continued to fail. The few storm drains we had were never meant to handle the full runoff without the natural creek doing its job. Streets cracked. Lawns washed away. Mold crept up garage doors. And somehow the blame always landed on residents. What Karen and her concrete-loving friends didn't understand was that creeks don't just disappear because you cover them with concrete. Water always finds a way. The underground movement had begun, literally. Water was seeping through soil, following ancient paths beneath our neat suburban streets, saturating the ground layer by layer. The foundation started cracking, not just because of clogged drains or heavy rain, but because the earth itself was shifting, swollen with trapped water straining against unnatural barriers. My evidence pile grew. Drone photos showing water migration patterns, city flood maps that were never updated after the HOA's illegal creek modification, and quiet conversations with contractors who confirmed the HOA had violated several county drainage codes. But I wasn't ready to strike yet. This had to get worse. It had to hurt. It had to break them. You could feel tension rising like the water table, in the way neighbors glared at each other across flooded sidewalks, in the way voices rose at HOA meetings, in the way once pristine lawns sagged under mud and resentment. Karen doubled down on enforcement, issuing new regulations, new fines, new inspections. She organized a neighborhood improvement committee to identify homes contributing to aesthetic decline. Guess whose name topped that list? I smiled when the notice arrived, 3 pages of accusations and threats. I added it to my growing binder of evidence. Because people like Karen, once they feel control slipping away, tend to get desperate. And desperate people make mistakes, big ones. The heavy envelope had sat at the bottom of my filing cabinet for years. I found it after Karen's latest violation notice, digging through old boxes until I discovered the battered blue folder my grandfather had given me when he signed over the property. Might be useful someday, he'd said, refusing to explain further. Inside was a gold mine, original land surveys dating back to 1952, a certified letter from the County Water Authority confirming a permanent natural drainage easement through my backyard, and copies of state environmental protection orders recognizing the creek as part of a protected watershed. Hard, official proof that my little creek wasn't just pretty, it was legally protected. No homeowners association had the right to fill, block, or tamper with it. And that's exactly what they had done. I made some calls, first to the County Water Authority requesting a property inspection due to suspected unauthorized modification of natural drainage systems, then to the City Environmental Office about potential wetland violations. While bureaucratic wheels turned, I got to work on anonymous whistleblowing. A burner email account, a carefully crafted message explaining the situation, complete with drone photos, pictures of the concrete pour, copies of the easement documents, and links to county code violations. I sent it to every local news station, the city newspaper, suburban Facebook groups, and the HOA gossip forum Karen had banned me from. Then I waited. 3 days later, county and city inspectors arrived. They spent hours measuring the concrete fill, taking soil samples and snapping photos from every angle. That night, the first news story hit, a short segment showing aerial shots of our flooded neighborhood while reporters explained that unauthorized modifications to natural drainage systems had worsened flooding and possibly violated multiple environmental protections. The next morning, an official investigation notice arrived, addressed to the HOA. Karen stormed into the emergency board meeting, cheeks flushed, hair frizzed from rain, and slammed papers down in front of shocked board members. She ranted about slander, false accusations, and residents sabotaging the community. Behind her, the projector screen showed images from the whistleblower packet, photos of concrete trucks at my creek, maps of the natural easement, and county codes they'd violated in bold red text. The room went silent. Even her loyal board members shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting anywhere but at her. She was cornered but doubled down, claiming the concrete was temporary erosion control, and insisting the HOA had the right to beautify common areas. When someone timidly asked for written proof of permission, Karen's mouth snapped shut. There was none. That night, harsher news coverage hit, using words like illegal, reckless, and potential civil and criminal penalties. Residents were interviewed on camera expressing outrage about property damage and plummeting home values. Within a week, county officials posted violation notices on the community center doors. City inspectors began knocking on doors to assess flooding and foundation damage. Lawsuits brewed as homeowners planned to sue both the HOA and individual board members for negligence. Karen tried to rally supporters, spin the narrative, claim victimhood, but nobody was buying it anymore. Neighbors who once nodded along to her tirades now crossed the street to avoid her. Board meetings barely scraped together a quorum. Her kingdom was crumbling. The first set of city citations arrived in thick envelopes to every HOA board member. The real shock came when red tags appeared on a dozen homes: unsafe structure, unstable foundation, immediate occupancy restrictions. In plain English, their dream houses had been declared unfit to live in. Moving vans clogged streets as bewildered homeowners scrambled to save what they could from houses sinking into the earth like slow-motion shipwrecks. Karen hired a lawyer and threatened to sue the city, but it was too late. The damage was obvious, the evidence overwhelming, the paper trail of negligence too thick. Insurance companies delivered the final blow, denying claims for water damage, foundation collapse, and mold remediation. Act of negligence, they said. Policy violations. Denied, denied, denied. Without insurance money, homeowners were trapped with worthless properties and crushing mortgages. Foreclosure notices appeared in windows like paper ghosts. Karen's own home, once the neighborhood showpiece with its manicured hedges and faux Greek columns, was the first condemned outright. By month's end, she was living in a borrowed RV at the edge of the development, wheels slowly sinking into the same mud she had unleashed. The HOA collapsed soon after. At an emergency meeting in the gutted community center, remaining residents voted to dissolve the organization entirely. The final financial report was read aloud like a funeral dirge. Over $2.3 million in projected legal liabilities, zero assets, bankruptcy imminent. Karen was last seen dragging boxes of shredded documents from the community center under a city marshal's watchful eye. As the HOA died its well-deserved death, our neighborhood faced a choice: try to patch the broken system or return to the land's original wisdom. The vote to restore natural drainage passed almost unanimously. The county environmental office offered grants for watershed restoration. Volunteers lined up to help, even some displaced homeowners who had once snubbed me. For weeks, we dug, shoveled, and planted, peeling back concrete scars to reveal the thirsty earth beneath. We rerouted water along its original path using native grasses, willow trees, and carefully placed stones. The first time the creek flowed again through my backyard, clear and laughing, it was like hearing an old friend call my name. I sat beside it, legs dangling in cool water, and smiled as dragonflies returned, frogs croaked in reeds, and the land itself seemed to exhale in relief. One sunny morning, I planted a small wooden sign where the creek curved into my property. I carved the letters myself, slow and deliberate. Nature always wins. It wasn't spite. It wasn't gloating. It was truth, pure and simple. For all their rules and fines and concrete and arrogance, they had forgotten the oldest law of all. No matter how high you build your walls, no matter how many papers you sign, you cannot conquer the land forever. It remembers. It waits. And when the time is right, it reclaims what's its own. Karen left soon after, towing her battered RV behind a rusted pickup. No farewell party, just relieved sighs. The house she once lorded over sits abandoned, half swallowed by the very swamp she helped create. A monument to hubris. New families who moved in never ask much about the past. They see the restored creek, thriving wetlands and healthy gardens, content to let the land tell its own story, a better one, a lasting one. Sometimes I still find myself sitting by the creek at sunset, watching water dance over stones, listening to frogs sing. I run my fingers over my wooden sign and smile because I know what this piece cost. And I know that no matter what comes next, no matter who tries to tame it or own it or reshape it, the land will endure. It will remember. It will win. Just like it always has. If you enjoyed this story of sweet revenge against an out-of-control HOA, don't forget to comment below and subscribe for more. Have you ever dealt with HOA nightmares? Share your experiences.